Greetings. Today's book is really special. Actually, it's something I found on YouTube. It is called Member of the Family by Dianne Lake and Deborah Herman. Why I found it on YouTube was because it has to do with the Manson family. And Leslie Van Houten was just released from prison, and Deborah Herman made a video with Dianne Lake talking about it all and what she thought of it. And because Dianne Lake was actually one of the people who was critical in sending up Leslie Van Houten into prison for 50 years. So anyway, I'm glad she's out, and whatever, but I read the book, got it at the library, and read the book, and it is just a really terrific memoir. Just like the one I just read of Guinevere Turner, When the World Didn't End, it is a memoir of childhood in a cult. And they're both very special because they're not done like right away, like 5 years later. They are done many years later, 50 years later, in the case of this one, where the woman involved has a chance to grow up, mature, really process what has gone on. In the case of Dianne Lake, make a whole other life with a family and a husband and children, 3 children who did not know anything about this until much later when they were grown up enough to hear about what she'd been through as a child. Also, it's very much a story of the California hippie scene of the 60s, but from this perspective of a young girl. And also unique to it is that she's a young girl who didn't run away to wear flowers in her hair in San Francisco from the Midwest. She was propelled into it all by her parents. And the first part of the book, 100 pages or so, and I'm glad she really included that, before she ever met Charlie, over 100 pages, she talks about her family that starts out in Minnesota. And she's the first child of these young parents, also 3 children in that family. And her dad starts he becomes an artist. He starts studying art late. He goes to art school after he's married. And he gets influenced by Beat Generation stuff. So Dianne Lake is born in 1953. So what we're talking about here is when she's like 10. So in the early 60s or before, he gets all involved with this romance of beat culture. Like talks to her, shows her a copy of the Dharma Bums, Kerouac's Dharma Bums, and so she has this father, and otherwise a very sort of middle class family. He's this artist, and at one point he splits. He takes off and goes to California to follow this dream of being beatnik artist in whether San Francisco or someplace. I guess he goes to, I don't know where he went, or I don't remember, but he went somewhere in California, and then eventually mom and the kids were settled in decent housing, kind of on welfare, kind of on public assistance, but everything was going okay. So unfortunately, Dad sends for them, and they all go out to California and live with him. And that's when the trouble ensues. It's really a story of a young girl with these involved with these two, the real father and this father figure that essentially was Manson later on, who were both wayward and kind of screwed up in their own way. So I don't want to tell the whole story, but mom and dad out in California, she turns him on to weed. They start getting involved much more in the early hippie scene in 1967, where we're around 1967 now, 66. They're going to be-ins, they're going to these kind of events, and for anyone like my age, this is really also a chronicle of a child thrust into a lot of this rather famous hippie things that went on in this period of the psychedelic 60s. I was in Ohio. I'm a couple of years older than Dianne Lake, and I was in Ohio away from it all. Didn't have LSD till 1970, and never went to California and all that. So, but she did. And what happens is her parents really kind of go a little haywire, to the point where they are dropping acid and really enjoying it. They're involved with a sort of a hippie newspaper called The Oracle, and a movement around that. And it evolves into them giving their children acid. They gave Dianne Lake acid when she was 13 years old, which now we're getting into real kind of child abuse here. So she had bad parents, really, who were just selfish. She talks about her dad feeling trapped with a mortgage in Minnesota and wanting to escape all that. And I guess he did escape mortgages, eventually, putting them all to live in a truck, or try to, which ended up having them be at the hog farm with Hugh Romney, who we can see in, the Woodstock movie, the clown activist character who, with his wife, had a LA area commune going on. So the parents joined that commune. Ultimately, Hugh Romney, she's a problem because she's a young woman and a young girl, and she's not really being supervised by her parents. And Romney and his wife are concerned that they're going to bring the law. She's going to bring the law into them, because of her underage status, and that they had this underage child here, and all the implications of child abuse, sexual as well as giving them acid and things like that going on then. So he offers her to live in the attic. She decides not to live in the attic, and through a series of events, she goes to the Monterey Pop Festival. She goes to all these other places that we heard about. The thing is, this book, I'm glad she waited to. It's 6 years old. I'm glad she waited to digest it all to write the book, because it's from the point of view of a grown-up, but she's not. There's not a tone. She's a Christian woman now, and credits her belief in God and Christ for making her life better today. But when she looks back, there's no judgment about it, really. There's no shame about it. So it's not, she doesn't go, oh, and I had to do this, and how shameful, blah, 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 blah. You know, none of this applied stuff that would have like created a certain sort of different feeling about it. It's more, as in Guinevere Turner's story, really just going through it with the girl and, you know, make your own conclusions. Ultimately, she has nowhere to go. And through this couple that wants her to be their lover, something goes on here, this and that and this and that. Ultimately, she ends up as a 14-year-old meeting Charlie Manson and becoming a member of the family, as the book, the name of the book says. Now, the picture of Manson she creates in the book and the family environment is also unique and wonderful, and feels so true, because she talks about his evolution and her evolution of her feelings about him. Like when they meet and he draws her into the scene, he has sex with her, but he doesn't ruthlessly rape her as other people might have done. He doesn't, he knows how to seduce people into his scene. He is the ultimate con man in a way, at least for a wayward child, and I guess the other women who brought into his world. So it's all love, and it's all you know, like the enlightenment of acid, and the she talks about their first time having sex and how he treats her very tenderly. He treats her lovingly. He really knows how to do this. And actually, for the first time, she has this experience with him that is very intense and beautiful in its way. And that is, you know, a serious way that these human animals that we are bond with one another. And, you know, it really worked in this case. So she's with them from early 67 all through 68 into 69. The murders did not occur until the August of 69, and really it was kind of in this in 69, early in the 69, in the summer of 69, when he really shifts, when he really, because he's kind of thinking, well, oh, Dennis Wilson comes around. They live in Dennis Wilson's house. Dennis Wilson rented the estate of Will Rogers, which, you know, a fabulous house, and they lived there for quite a while, the whole family, with Manson, with Dennis Wilson, who was one of the Beach Boys, the drummer for the Beach Boys, so of the famous Wilson family, Brian Wilson, whatever. So he seduces Dennis Wilson by the free love of the girls and drugs, and he thinks that Dennis is going to help him to become a rock star, which of course does not manifest. You know, I was thinking of the Lyman family, the book before this, and the thing I just did about the Lyman family. Unlike the Lyman family and Mel Lyman's music and what he tried to produce, I listened to the reprise record that the Lyman family put out called American Avatar, or I listened to pieces of it. And actually Charles Manson's music and songs was much better and much more commercial and much more of a viable notion that it could have been geared into a product. She talks about a recording session that she goes with him at Brian Wilson's house with Dennis Wilson, kind of producing the scene, and how Manson eventually just goes off his nut because he thinks people are going to mess with him. They're going to produce his songs, which, anyone knows that's what happens in commercial music. He records, he has the song, they record it, they bring in session musicians, and make a real product that can be sold. And he couldn't play along with that. So there's that, and then there's also a trying to get Terry Mulcher, who was also big in the LA music business, and who was also very connected. He was the son of Doris Day. Both Brian Wilson, Dennis Wilson, and Terry Mulcher are dead. She talks about how Dennis was a kind of a risk addict, like jumping off a big cliff, and I think he eventually died, 20 years ago by jumping off a boat or something like that. So, and Melcher is also dead too from melanoma. So Melcher rejects him. No, we're not going to do this, and I think that seems to be the point where he switches and really gets into the whole the race war stuff, and the Beatles' White Album comes out, and he thinks that all these are messages, or at least tells the girls that all these are messages about that the Beatles are sending about the impending race war. Blackbird singing in the dead of night, and of course Helter Skelter, which is famously what they wrote on the wall in one of the murder sites. So there was the Tate and La Bianca murders, 2 houses, but there were also a couple other people who were killed. One of the ranch hands at the Spawn Ranch, and a guy named Gary Hinman, who was close to them, and actually a very sweet guy, according to Dianne Lake, that Charlie murdered. So it all switches into this race war stuff, and Charlie's obsessed with going out to the desert, Death Valley, and finding a hole in Death Valley that they're going to go in and live in while the race war is going on, and so she's told all this stuff. There's more acid being taken. There's more programming about, he starts preaching. Really, he doesn't sing his songs so much anymore. He goes on to these big preaching things about the race war and all that stuff. Goes off his rocker, basically, and takes them with him. Fortunately for Dianne Lake, he tries to get rid of her. Actually, I don't know if he knew what he was going to do, and or he was just once again concerned about having this jailbait 15-year-old around. And so he tries to get rid of her, 15-year-old, and she misses the family, misses Charlie. She loves the other girls. She's bonded with this scene because, that is really the crux of the story of a young girl who has a family, a father that does not want to deal with the responsibility. I don't know why these people went ahead and had these 3 kids, because ultimately it was completely irresponsible. He doesn't want to have the mortgage and the house and the things that create a safe environment for the child to be raised up in. He's very selfish, and for all we can tell in the story, mom either goes along or is selfish herself, and ultimately they give her a letter that says she's on her own, which of course wouldn't have been legal, but she had that, and so it's a story about a youth and the search for family, and the unique part of it is that she didn't run away from the stable conservative family in the Midwest to go join these things. She was like propelled into it against her will, and just kind of tried to go with the flow as best she could, with results that were horrifying. Could have been worse, because she happened to not be there when she was not sent by Charlie off on these creepy crawly missions at first, and then the murders. She heard of them after the fact, as a matter of fact. First from Tex Watson, and then a little bit from Leslie. Saw Leslie come back from one of the kill sites and destroy evidence, a rope and her clothing and so forth, and that is what ultimately ended up being enough real evidence to send Leslie Van Houten away for all those many years. I'm not particularly a Manson. I don't really. It's not my thing to look into everything about Manson. I remember when it was all going on, and I actually read 50 years ago the book called The Family by movement figure, poet, one of the thugs, Ed Sanders, and it was great when I read it at the time, and I can't talk about it now because it was 50 years ago. I didn't read Helter Skelter, Busleone's book, and I read another one just last year while I was in Mexico. I read Tom O'Neill's book called Chaos, which was his speculation, or his whatever evidence he came up with, that actually Manson was part of CIA mind control experiments, MK Ultra, and that he was somehow caught up in that, maybe in prison and so forth, and was kind of a CIA operative to create this horrifying scene to kind of screw up the hippie scene and that end of the peace and love movement. I don't know, and chasing these things around is like a dog chasing its tail, trying to figure out trying to catch something that's really, hard to pin down, hard to grasp. Although I read a piece just today on Mint Press about MK Ultra and Nelson Rockefeller and the experiments that the CIA was doing with prisoners. So there is something there for sure. And aside from all that, Dianne Lake's book is a really excellent read. Dianne Lake and Deborah Herman, Dianne and Deborah have produced a really wonderful, quick. I swallowed this one up. It was just, it's a terrific read, and I highly recommend it, especially if you're at all interested in any of this scene about Manson or any of that stuff, or true crime. I mean, true crime is a big deal, isn't it? Didn't they do a Manhunters thing about Manson? I don't watch Manhunters, I don't know. So, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.